At the gala, my sister-in-law threw wine at my son and hissed, "Get this trash out." As everyone stared, a deep voice boomed, "Who dares to assault my heir?" Her family instantly turned pale. The steam from the iron hissed, rising into the stuffy air of my small queen's apartment. I pressed the hot metal against the fabric of a simple, structured black sheath dress. It was 5 years old. It was the exact same dress I had worn to bury my husband. My name is Valerie. I am 33 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have been navigating the exhausting, lonely, and fiercely beautiful journey of being a single mother. As I smoothed out a stubborn wrinkle near the hem, my chest tightened with that familiar, dull ache. I thought of Julian. He was a struggling musician when I met him, a man who played acoustic guitar at local dive bars and subway stations. He didn't have a dime to his name, but he had a smile that could disarm a loaded weapon, and a heart so full of love it seemed to spill over onto everyone he met. He used to make me laugh over cheap diner coffee, sketching out big dreams on thin paper napkins. He told me he walked away from his past to find something real. He never told me what that past was, and I never pushed him. We had each other, and when our son Miles was born, our tiny, mismatched world was perfect. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor. When Miles was just 1 year old, Julian's heart simply gave out. A congenital defect nobody caught until it was too late. One minute he was singing a lullaby to our baby, and the next, my entire world collapsed. I hung the black dress on the closet door and turned to look at the living room. Miles, now 6 years old, was standing in front of the hallway mirror, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in deep concentration as he tried to adjust a little clip-on bow tie. He had his father's messy brown hair and those same deep, soulful eyes. "Mommy, is this straight?" he asked, turning toward me. His little suit was from a thrift store, but I had spent hours tailoring it by hand so it fit him perfectly. "You look incredibly handsome, buddy," I said, crouching down to fix the collar of his white shirt. "Like a secret agent." He giggled, leaning in to hug me. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of his baby shampoo. I needed that strength because today we were walking into the lion's den. Sitting on my kitchen counter was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering. It was an invitation to my parents' 40th wedding anniversary gala. A massive, overly expensive affair out in the Hamptons. Lawrence and Barbara Gallagher, my parents, were treating this party like the social event of the decade. I didn't want to go. I loathed the fake smiles, the judgmental whispers, and the suffocating toxicity of my family. But I was putting on this morning dress for a reason. I wasn't just going out of a sense of daughterly duty. I was going because I had a job to finish. The drive from Queens to the Hamptons usually takes about 2.5 hours, but doing it in a 10-year-old sedan with a broken air conditioner in the middle of a summer heat wave makes it feel like an eternity. I rolled the windows down, trying to catch a breeze, while Miles played quietly with his favorite worn-out teddy bear in the back seat. As the landscape shifted from crowded city streets to sprawling green lawns and massive gates, I thought about the family I was about to face. Growing up in the Gallagher household, the hierarchy was established early and enforced brutally. My older brother, Gregory, was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. He was handsome, charming, and groomed from birth to take over my father's lucrative commercial real estate empire. Whatever Gregory wanted, Gregory got. And then there was me. The disappointment. I never cared about the country club memberships or the designer handbags. I liked numbers. I liked puzzles. When I married Julian, a man with callous fingers and empty pockets, my parents practically disowned me. They thought I was throwing my life away. When Julian died, they didn't offer a shoulder to cry on. They offered "I told you so." Gregory, on the other hand, had married Cassandra. Cassandra was a social climber of the highest order. She was the kind of woman who treated waitstaff like stray dogs and viewed her marriage as a corporate merger. To my family, she was the perfect daughter-in-law because she looked good in magazines and knew how to throw a party. They all looked down on me. They saw my old car, my thrift store clothes, and the fact that I raised Miles without a husband, and they concluded I was a miserable failure. They thought I worked as a low-level, boring bookkeeper in some dingy office, barely scraping by. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that my boring bookkeeping was actually high-level forensic accounting. I didn't just balance ledgers. I hunted corporate ghosts. I was the person big corporations hired at $500 an hour to find the dirty money their executives tried to hide. I tracked offshore accounts, untangled shell companies, and handed white-collar criminals over to the federal government. But I kept my life quiet. I liked my peace, and I knew that if my family knew I had money, they would either try to use me or destroy me. So, I let them believe their own narrative. I let them think I was the weak, struggling widow. It made them sloppy. For the past 3 months, I hadn't just been avoiding my family's phone calls, I had been auditing their lives. It started accidentally. I was reviewing some public property records for a client and noticed a strange overlap with my father's real estate firm. Curiosity got the better of me. When you are a forensic accountant, an irregular number is like a loose thread on a sweater. You just have to pull it. So I pulled. And the entire sweater unraveled. My brother Gregory was heading up a massive new eco-friendly condo development called the Green Horizon Project. It was the crown jewel of the company, the project that was supposed to secure their legacy. But the numbers didn't make sense. The cash flow was a chaotic mess. It took me weeks of sleepless nights, drinking black coffee at my tiny kitchen table while Miles slept, to piece it all together. I hacked through layers of financial camouflage. What I found wasn't a real estate project. It was a textbook Ponzi scheme. Gregory was taking millions of dollars from new investors, including our parents' wealthy friends, and funneling it out the back door. The money wasn't going to construction crews or architects. It was being wired to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands called Lux Consulting. And who was the sole beneficiary of Lux Consulting? Cassandra. My brother was stealing millions to fund his wife's insatiable appetite for private jets, Cartier jewelry, and European vacations, all while telling investors that supply chain issues were delaying construction. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the entire house of cards was about to collapse. I could have just told my father. I could have handled it privately. But I remembered the time I asked Gregory for $50 to help cover a copay for Miles's asthma medication, and he told me to stop acting like a beggar. I remembered Cassandra telling me to sell Julian's old guitar if I was so desperate. They didn't deserve a private warning. They were criminals stealing from innocent people to fund their vanity. So, I did my job. At exactly 9 o'clock this morning, I hit send on a heavily encrypted email. I sent 3 months' worth of forged tax returns, hidden bank statements, and wire transfer logs directly to my contact at the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. The trap was already set. The authorities were reviewing the files right now. I was driving to this party not to celebrate an anniversary, but to watch the final act of a play I had secretly written. When I finally turned onto the long, tree-lined avenue leading to the estate, the knot in my stomach tightened. The Hamptons property was a sprawling, modern fortress of glass and stone, practically screaming new money. A line of luxury vehicles, mostly black Bentleys, sleek Porsches, and massive Range Rovers, was inching toward the open wrought iron gates. I pulled my faded, dusty sedan into the line. As I reached the front, a burly security guard in a tight black suit stepped out, holding his hand up. He didn't hide the look of visible disdain as his eyes swept over my cracked bumper. He leaned down to my window, checking an iPad. "Name?" he asked flatly. "Valerie Gallagher," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm the daughter of the hosts." He frowned, swiping the screen. "I have a Gregory and a Cassandra on the VIP list. I have the guests of honor. But no Valerie. You're going to have to turn around, ma'am. You're blocking the entrance." Panic flared in my chest. Behind me, someone in a Mercedes laid on their horn. Miles shifted nervously in his booster seat. "Mommy, why won't they let us in?" he whispered. I grabbed my phone and dialed Cassandra. It rang 4 times before she picked up. The background noise of clinking champagne flutes and a jazz quartet filled the line. "Valerie, you're late," Cassandra chirped. Her voice was dripping with that fake, sugary sweetness she reserved for an audience. "Cassandra, tell the guard to let me in." "He says I'm not on the list," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "Oh, honey, that's not a mistake," she sighed, her tone dropping into a sharp, condescending register. "The front entrance and the valet are reserved for VIP guests and primary investors. Since you aren't exactly contributing to the gala financially, Gregory and I thought it best you use the service entrance around back. It's where the catering staff enters. It just fits your situation better. We don't want to confuse the valets." Before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stared at the phone. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. I looked at the security guard, who was already aggressively waving me away. With my face burning with humiliation, I had to put my car in reverse, navigating backward past a line of impatient millionaires who stared at me like I was an eyesore. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Miles clutching his teddy bear tightly. I swallowed my pride, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I would endure this. I would walk through the service door. Because I knew exactly how this night was going to end. Parking near the dumpsters was a calculated insult. I helped Miles out of the car, and holding his small hand, we navigated the service path. We walked past stacks of empty cardboard boxes, inhaling the sharp smell of industrial bleach mixed with rotting food scraps. We pushed through a heavy metal door and found ourselves in the frantic chaos of the catering kitchen. Waiters in crisp white shirts rushed past us carrying trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres, shouting orders over the clatter of silverware. Miles squeezed my hand tighter, intimidated by the noise. When we finally pushed through the swinging wooden doors into the main ballroom, the transition was blinding. The room was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over a sea of silk, velvet, and diamonds. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted truffles. A live string quartet was playing softly in the corner. We hadn't taken 3 steps onto the marble floor when a figure detached herself from a group of socialites near the bar. It was Cassandra. She swept toward us like a glittering bird of prey. She was wearing a custom, floor-length gold gown that clung to her perfectly sculpted figure. My forensic brain instantly cataloged the dress. It was from a recent runway collection. Easily $12,000. Paid for, no doubt, by the money her husband was stealing. "Valerie, you finally made it," Cassandra announced. She pitched her voice perfectly so that her wealthy friends standing nearby could hear every word. She threw her arms around me in a stiff, theatrical embrace that felt more like a threat. The heavy, floral scent of her perfume was overpowering. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, and let her gaze slowly rake over my plain black dress. She dramatically sighed, placing a hand over her heart. "Oh, honey, are you really still wearing that old thing? Isn't that the same dress you wore to Julian's funeral 5 years ago?" I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. The women behind her exchanged amused, pitying glances. "It's clean, Cassandra," I said quietly. "I know, but I told Gregory to wire you $5,000 last week so you could buy something appropriate for tonight," she said, her eyes wide with mock concern. "Did you not get it? Or did you spend it on other things? You really need to let go of your pride, Valerie. We're family. We just want to help you look the part." I stared at her. It was a masterful, sociopathic lie. There had been no wire transfer. There had never been a wire transfer. But right now, to the 100 elites watching us, she was the benevolent, wealthy sister-in-law, and I was the ungrateful charity case who squandered her handouts. "I didn't receive any money," I said evenly. "And this dress is fine." Cassandra let out a tinkling laugh that grated on my nerves. "Oh, you and your stubbornness. Well, try to mingle. But maybe stay near the back. We have photographers from a lifestyle magazine covering the event, and we really need the aesthetic to be cohesive tonight." She patted my cheek, her massive diamond ring cold against my skin, and turned her back on us. I guided Miles away from the center of the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. We began the humiliating trek to find our assigned seats. I scanned the beautiful calligraphy place cards on the pristine, floral-draped tables near the stage. Table 1 was for my parents and the most important investors. Table 2 hosted Gregory, Cassandra, and her elite country club circle. I kept walking. Table 10. Table 20. We kept moving further and further away from the light and the music until we reached the very edge of the ballroom. There, tucked behind a thick structural pillar, I found it. Table 42. It wasn't even a proper banquet table. It was a small, wobbly bistro table barely large enough for two people, shoved aggressively into the darkest corner. To my left was the swinging door to the kitchen, where waiters constantly rushed in and out. To my right was the entrance to the men's restroom. A plastic bin for dirty, used cloth napkins sat practically touching my chair. The smell of industrial air freshener mixed unpleasantly with the garbage. I looked at the place card. It didn't have calligraphy. It was written in sloppy black marker, Valerie and child. This wasn't an oversight. This was a message. They were showing me exactly where I belonged in their world, next to the trash. Suddenly, the crowd parted slightly. My parents, Lawrence and Barbara, were making their rounds, greeting guests. My father looked tired, clutching a half-empty glass of scotch. My mother walked with the stiff, proud posture of a general, dripping in sapphire jewelry. I felt a brief, foolish spark of hope. Maybe they would see where Cassandra had seated us and say something. Miles perked up. "Grandma, Grandpa," he called out softly, holding up his teddy bear. My parents stopped a few feet away. My mother didn't smile. She didn't crouch down to hug her grandson. Instead, her eyes started nervously toward the center of the room, checking to see if anyone important was watching them interact with us. "Sit down, Valerie," my mother hissed in a low, sharp voice. "Keep your voice down." "Mom, look at where we are sitting," I whispered, gesturing to the trash bin. "We are next to the bathroom." "And whose fault is that?" she snapped, adjusting her diamond necklace. "If you had listened to us and taken a real job instead of burying your head in spreadsheets, you'd be at the front table. Today is about the future of this family's business. Gregory has very important investors here. They don't need to see his widowed sister looking depressed in an old dress. Just stay here, eat your food, and keep the boy completely quiet. Do not ruin this night for your brother." My father didn't even look at me. He just took another sip of his scotch and followed my mother back into the glittering crowd. I looked down at Miles. His little shoulders had slumped, and his hopeful smile was gone. He looked confused and small. My chest ached with a physical pain. I crouched down to his eye level and forced the brightest, most reassuring smile I could muster. "Listen to me, Miles," I whispered, tapping him on the nose. "Do you know why we are sitting back here in the shadows?" He shook his head slowly. "Because we are on a secret mission. We aren't just guests tonight. We are secret spies. And from back here, we can watch everyone in the room without them seeing us. Can you be my super spy tonight?" His eyes widened, the sadness instantly replaced by a spark of excitement. "A spy?" he whispered back. "Exactly," I said, lifting him into the creaky chair. "So we have to be very observant." I sat down in the smell of dishwater and bleach, holding my son's hand. I stared out at the sea of wealthy investors and my arrogant family. They thought they had put me in my place. They had no idea that from this dark corner, I was about to burn their entire world to the ground. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you very much. 3 agonizing hours dragged by. The air conditioning in the ballroom was struggling against the body heat of 100 guests, but the real suffocation came from watching the sheer, thoughtless waste around me. Waiters with silver platters glided past our wobbly table in the dark corner, deliberately averting their eyes. They had clearly been instructed to ignore us. Miles was shifting restlessly in my lap. It had been hours since our meager lunch back in Queens, and the heavy, intoxicating aroma of roasted duck and truffle oil wafting from the kitchen doors next to us was absolute torture for a 6-year-old. He pressed his face against my shoulder, his little voice barely a whisper. "Mommy, my tummy hurts. I am really hungry." I pulled him closer, kissing the top of his head. "I know, baby. I am so sorry. We will get pizza on the way home, just you and me. The biggest slice you can eat." I reached into my small black purse, hoping I had remembered to pack a granola bar, but my fingers only brushed against my phone and my keys. Suddenly, the jazz band stopped playing. The low hum of wealthy conversation died down as the lights dimmed, focusing a bright spotlight on the raised stage at the front of the room. It was time for the speeches. Gregory and Cassandra stepped up to the microphone, looking like a plastic cake topper come to life. Cassandra's gold dress caught the light, practically blinding the front row. My parents, Lawrence and Barbara, sat at the head table looking up at them with expressions of pure, unadulterated worship. Gregory cleared his throat, adjusting his expensive silk tie. He gave a speech that sounded like it was written by a public relations firm, talking about legacy, family values, and the hard work it took to build their real estate empire. Every word out of his mouth was a carefully constructed lie. Then Cassandra stepped forward. She was holding a large, thick gold envelope. She pressed a hand to her chest, feigning a tearful smile. "Lawrence, Barbara," she cooed into the microphone, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You have dedicated your lives to giving this family everything. To show our endless gratitude, Gregory and I wanted to give you a small token of our appreciation. We are sending you on an all-expenses-paid, first-class luxury tour of Dubai for 2 weeks." The room erupted in thunderous applause. My mother actually gasped, covering her mouth with her manicured hands, while my father stood up to shake Gregory's hand vigorously. The elite guests at the surrounding tables whispered to each other about how generous and successful Gregory and Cassandra were. Sitting in the shadows by the trash bin, my forensic accountant brain immediately went to work. First-class flights to Dubai, plus a luxury hotel for 2 weeks. I quickly calculated the cost in my head. $50,000. Easily. My stomach churned, and a wave of pure disgust washed over me. I knew exactly where that money came from. While I was digging through Gregory's offshore shell companies earlier this week, I saw the exact transfer. That $50,000 had been siphoned directly from the employee pension fund of their own construction company. They were buying my parents' love with stolen money, and everyone in this room was cheering for them. The applause finally died down, and the band began to play a soft, upbeat melody. Miles looked up at me, his deep brown eyes shining in the dim light. He had stopped crying about being hungry. Instead, he was clutching a folded piece of thick construction paper against his chest. "Mommy," he whispered eagerly. "Is it my turn now? Can I give Grandma and Grandpa my present?" I looked at the paper. It was a drawing he had worked on for 3 straight days at our kitchen table, trying to get the colors just right with his cheap crayons. It was a simple, beautiful picture of 4 stick figures holding hands: me, Miles, Grandma, and Grandpa. He didn't understand the complex web of toxicity and hatred in this family. He just knew it was their anniversary, and he wanted to make them smile. I swallowed the heavy lump in my throat. I wanted him to have his moment. I wanted my parents to look at this pure, innocent child and realize that real love could not be bought with airplane tickets to Dubai. "Go ahead, my brave little spy," I whispered, giving his shoulders a gentle squeeze. "Go show them." Miles hopped off the creaky chair and began walking toward the stage. His slightly scuffed thrift store dress shoes clicked softly against the polished marble floor. Because he was so small, and because he emerged from the dark corner by the kitchen, the crowd didn't notice him at first. But as he crossed the center of the massive ballroom, the wealthy guests began to turn their heads. The murmurs started almost immediately. I could see women in expensive gowns squinting at him, whispering to their husbands. They were judging his clothes. They were wondering why a child who looked so out of place was walking toward the guests of honor. Miles ignored them. He kept his eyes locked on the stage, his little face set with determination. He reached the wooden stairs and climbed them carefully, struggling just a bit with the height of the steps. Finally, he stood at the edge of the stage, just a few feet away from where my parents were sitting. "Grandma? Grandpa?" Miles said. His voice was shaking slightly, but he held the drawing out with both hands, presenting it like it was the most valuable treasure in the world. "I didn't have money for a ticket, but I made this for you." My mother looked at the crayon drawing. Then she looked out at her wealthy friends in the audience. She didn't reach out to take it. She looked completely embarrassed, as if a stray dog had just wandered into her pristine dining room. Before my mother could even figure out how to shoo him away politely, Cassandra stepped between them. She had just picked up a fresh, full glass of dark red Cabernet from a passing waiter. She loomed over my 6-year-old son, her gold dress shimmering like fish scales. She looked down at the drawing, a cruel, calculating smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, how cute," Cassandra said, leaning into the microphone stand so her voice carried across the dead-silent ballroom. "A little scribble." Then, she moved her hand. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. With a precise, deliberate flick of her wrist, Cassandra tilted her crystal glass forward. The dark red wine cascaded downward in a heavy stream, splashing directly onto the center of the construction paper in Miles's hands. The cheap paper instantly absorbed the liquid. The bright, cheerful crayon colors melted into a soggy, bleeding mess of purple and dark red. The smiling stick figures of our family dissolved into a ruined stain right before his eyes. Miles stood frozen. His mouth fell open, and his lower lip began to tremble violently. The wine dripped from the ruined paper onto his small white shirt and down onto his shoes. Cassandra didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She stepped back to avoid getting any drops on her own shoes and laughed. It was a sharp, wicked sound that echoed through the speakers. "Oops," she sneered loudly. My hand slipped. But honestly, it is probably for the best. It was an absolute eyesore anyway. I don't think your grandparents want to hang a piece of street trash next to their real art. She paused, letting her cold eyes sweep over his stained clothes. "Look at the little bastard crying. He is ruining the aesthetic." The word bastard hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. She had broadcast it to 100 of the city's most elite citizens. Miles let out a loud, heartbroken sob that shattered the silence. The sound of his pure devastation flipped a switch inside me. The fear evaporated. The hesitation vanished. Every ounce of restraint I had built up over the last 5 years burned away in a split second. I didn't walk, I stormed. I shoved my way through the crowd of stunned billionaires and socialites, my heels striking the marble floor like hammer blows. I leaped up the stairs to the stage and grabbed Miles, pulling his trembling, wine-soaked body into my chest. I turned and stepped directly into Cassandra's personal space. "Apologize," I demanded, my voice low, steady, and vibrating with absolute fury. "Apologize to my son right now." Cassandra rolled her eyes, stepping back behind her husband. "Oh, please, Valerie, stop being so dramatic." It was a piece of garbage. Before I could move closer, Gregory stepped in. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and raw panic. "That is enough," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You are embarrassing the family. You are making a scene in front of my investors. Take your garbage, kid, and get out of my house before I have security throw you onto the street." I looked at my brother. I looked at my parents, who were staring at the floor, refusing to intervene. They were choosing money over my son's dignity. They thought I was weak. But the game was about to change permanently. "Get out!" Gregory shouted again, shoving me backward toward the edge of the stage. "Security! Remove these two right now." Before the estate guards could even take a step toward the stage, a sound like a thunderclap echoed from the back of the ballroom. The massive, 12-foot double oak doors of the grand entrance did not just open, they were kicked violently apart. The heavy wood slammed against the interior walls with a deafening crash that made the crystal chandeliers above us tremble. The string quartet shrieked to a halt. Every single head in the room snapped toward the entrance. 6 men walked in. They were not party security. They were mountains of solid muscle encased in sharp, tailored dark suits, wearing coiled earpieces and dark sunglasses. They moved with the terrifying, synchronized precision of a military strike team. They didn't ask for permission. They simply formed a human wedge and marched straight down the center of the room. The wealthy investors, the socialites who usually demanded respect everywhere they went, scrambled out of the way like frightened children. Wine spilled on expensive gowns as people pressed themselves against the silk-covered walls to avoid the path of these intruders. On the stage, Gregory froze, his hand dropping from my arm. He turned the color of pale ash. He was shaking. Cassandra gripped his shoulder, her eyes wide with panic. I knew exactly what they were thinking. With the massive fraud they were running, they thought this was a federal raid. They thought the FBI had finally kicked the doors in. But it wasn't the authorities. It was something far more powerful in this room. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. The man who stepped into the light was Victor Kensington. Even in a room full of millionaires, Victor existed in an entirely different stratosphere. At 70 years old, he carried himself with the quiet, unshakable authority of a man who could crash the stock market with a single phone call. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his silver hair swept back, revealing a face etched with hard-earned power. He was notoriously reclusive. He never attended mid-level real estate parties. The social equivalent of a nuclear bomb had just walked into the room. Cassandra's panic instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of ecstatic, delusional joy. Her eyes lit up with dollar signs. For months, she had bombarded Victor's office with desperate letters, gift baskets, and invitations, begging him to invest in her failing eco-friendly condo project. She actually believed her persistence had worked. She thought he was here for her. Oh my God, Cassandra whispered breathlessly. He came. He actually came. She shoved Gregory aside and practically ran down the stairs of the stage. She smoothed down her gold gown, plastered on her most dazzling, sycophantic smile, and walked toward the billionaire with her arms outstretched. Mr. Kensington, she gushed loudly, making sure the photographers were looking. What an incredible honor. I am Cassandra. We have been corresponding. Welcome to our humble celebration. Please come this way. I have a VIP table waiting for you. Cassandra reached out her hand to shake his, beaming with arrogant pride. Victor Kensington didn't take her hand. He didn't even look at her face. He kept his hands casually clasped behind his back and looked right through her, as if she were made of glass. As if she were a particularly annoying insect buzzing in his path. Cassandra's smile faltered. Her hand hovered awkwardly in the empty air. Mr. Kensington, she tried again, her voice cracking slightly. Victor didn't speak. He simply stepped around her without breaking his stride. The snub was so public, so utterly brutal, that a collective gasp rippled through the 100 guests. Cassandra was left standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, her face burning an angry, humiliated red. Victor walked past the VIP tables. He walked past my terrified parents at the head table. He moved with a deep, undeniable momentum, straight toward the darkest corner of the room. He walked right up to table 42, the wobbly little table next to the kitchen doors and the trash bin. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Victor looked down at the floor. Lying in the dust, near the leg of the table, was Miles's favorite worn-out teddy bear. It had fallen out of my bag earlier when we were rushed away. Slowly, deliberately, the billionaire knelt down. His expensive, tailored trousers touched the dirty floor. A murmur of absolute shock went through the crowd. Men like Victor Kensington did not kneel for anyone. He picked up the teddy bear, gently brushing the dust off its fur with a tenderness that seemed entirely foreign to his terrifying reputation. He stood back up and turned to face the stage, walking toward where I was holding my son. Victor climbed the stairs. He stopped right in front of us. His sharp, steel-gray eyes scanned my face before softening completely as they landed on Miles. My son was still shivering, his cheap white shirt stained a gruesome red from the wine. "Hello there, young man," Victor said. His voice was deep and gravelly, but it held a warmth that made the tears prick my eyes. "I believe this belongs to you." Miles peeked out from my chest. He looked at the tall stranger, then at his bear. He slowly reached out with a trembling hand and took the toy, clutching it tightly against his wine-soaked shirt. "Thank you," Miles whispered. "You are very welcome," Victor replied. Then he looked at me. There was a profound, shared sorrow in his gaze. "He looks just like him, Valerie. He looks exactly like Julian." I nodded, the tears finally spilling over my eyelashes. Julian had told me his family was complicated. He had told me he walked away from vast wealth because he couldn't stand the coldness, the greed, and the conditional love. He wanted to be a struggling musician because it was honest. I had honored his secret, hiding us from his father's empire. But after Julian died, Victor had found us. He had watched from afar, respecting my independence, until he realized the nest of vipers my own family had become. Victor turned his back to us and faced the frozen ballroom. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried with the weight of absolute authority. I was under the impression that this was a celebration, Victor said, his tone conversational yet terrifyingly cold. But it seems I have walked into an interrogation. Just moments ago, as I was entering the hallway, I heard a very specific word broadcast over the speakers. Victor took a slow, deliberate step toward Gregory and Cassandra. I heard someone refer to a child as a bastard. I want to know who has the audacity to use that slur against my own flesh and blood. He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was agonizing. Then he delivered the killing blow. Who dared to assault the only living heir to the Kensington Empire? The word heir hit the room like a physical shockwave. On the stage, Cassandra looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had defined her entire existence evaporated in a single second, leaving behind only naked terror. She took a stumbling step backward, her heel catching on the hem of her $12,000 gown. Beside her, Gregory completely lost all motor function. His hands went limp. The heavy crystal tumbler of scotch he was holding plummeted to the stage floor, shattering with a violent crash that made half the room jump. The amber liquid splattered across his polished shoes, but he didn't even flinch. He was staring at Victor with the hollow eyes of a man watching his life burn to ashes. At the head table, my parents looked like they were having simultaneous medical emergencies. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp, clutching her diamond necklace. I could see the gears turning frantically in her head. She was replaying every cruel thing she had ever said to me. Every time she had ignored Miles. She realized with horrifying clarity that she had spent years worshipping a fake, embezzling son, while treating the true prince of the family, the billionaire's grandson, like a beggar. Survival instinct kicked in. My father jumped up from his chair, his hands shaking, and rushed toward the stage. "Mr. Kensington, please be reasonable," my father stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. "You are getting the wrong impression of our family dynamics. We love Valerie. We have supported her financially since the day Julian died. We send her a check every single month. We pay for the boys' clothes. We are a loving family." My mother nodded vigorously from the table. "Yes, exactly. If she looks poor, it is just her own stubbornness. We have never let them go without. Perhaps Valerie just forgot to mention our contributions." She glared at me, silently commanding me to smile and agree to save them from ruin. They expected me to fold. They expected me to be the quiet, obedient daughter who protected their image. I gently pushed Miles behind me, shielding him from their view. I looked my father dead in the eye. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. It was the cold, clinical smile of an auditor who had just found the smoking gun. "That is a very interesting version of history, Father," I said. "But you seem to forget what I do for a living," I continued, my voice calm, projecting clearly into the silent room. "In my line of work, we have a saying. Men lie. Women lie. But numbers never lie." I reached into my black purse and pulled out my smartphone. My mother's eyes darted to the device. "Valerie, what are you doing?" she hissed. "Put that away right now." I ignored her. I walked past my trembling brother and stepped over the shattered glass of his spilled scotch. I approached the audiovisual cart at the edge of the stage, the one Gregory was supposed to use for his corporate presentation later. My hands were perfectly steady. I had done this 1,000 times in courtrooms presenting evidence to federal juries. This was no different, except the jury was a room full of socialites, and the defendants were my own flesh and blood. I found the HDMI cable and plugged it into my phone. A second later, the massive 40-foot projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. The image of the smiling, fake family crest vanished. It was replaced by the stark, high-definition interface of my text message history. I tapped on the group chat named Family. The room gasped. The text bubbles were blown up to 10 feet tall, glowing bright white against the dim ballroom lighting. Everyone could see them. The investors in the back rows stood up on their tiptoes to get a better view. I scrolled up to a conversation from last month. On the screen, my message read, "Gregory, please. Miles has a cavity and I am short on the deductible. Can you send the $50 you promised?" Below it, Gregory's reply was displayed in cold, brutal blue. "No money this month. Figure it out yourself. Stop acting like a beggar." I scrolled up further. A message from Cassandra, dated 2 months ago. "Do not show your face at the house this weekend. We have important guests and we don't want your depressing energy ruining the mood. If you need money, go sell that old junk guitar your dead husband left you." The silence in the room was suffocating. I looked at my parents. My mother was staring at the massive screen, her hand covering her mouth in absolute horror. She had spent years telling her country club friends how much they financially supported me. Now, her friends were reading the cruel truth in 40-foot font. I turned back to the crowd. As you can see, the financial support my parents just bragged about is non-existent. The love they claim to have is conditional. And the family unity they are celebrating tonight is nothing more than a marketing strategy. Cassandra realized that the sentimental, loving aunt angle was completely dead. The facade was shattered beyond repair. So, like a cornered rat, she switched tactics. She smoothed the front of her gold gown, forcing her face into a mask of cold corporate professionalism. She turned to Victor Kensington, deciding to appeal to the one thing she believed billionaires cared about: greed. "All right, fine," Cassandra said, waving her hand dismissively at the screen. "Every family has its dirty laundry, Mr. Kensington. But we are not here to discuss petty domestic squabbles or text messages taken out of context. We are here to do business. You are a visionary. You didn't come here to referee a family fight. You came because you know the Green Horizon project is a $50 million opportunity. Let's focus on the profit margins." Valerie counts pennies for a living. She doesn't understand high-level commercial real estate. She looked at me and sneered. "Step aside, Valerie. Go get your kids some punch while the real adults talk." She thought she had successfully pivoted the conversation. She had absolutely no idea that she had just invited a forensic accountant to publicly critique her business model. "You want to talk numbers, Cassandra?" I asked, swiping left on my phone screen. "Let's talk numbers." The cruel text messages vanished, replaced by a highly complex, color-coded spreadsheet. To the untrained eye, it looked like a boring wall of data. But to the dozens of wealthy real estate investors sitting in the audience, it looked like a death sentence. For the past 3 months, while my family was busy ignoring my existence, I was busy auditing theirs, I announced, my voice echoing off the walls. I went through every public filing, every leaked database, and every careless digital footprint my brother and his wife left behind. And let me tell you, the Green Horizon project is indeed green, but only because it is designed to wash dirty money. Gregory let out a strangled sob. "Mr. Kensington, she is lying," he stammered, his hands shaking violently. "She is just jealous. She forged this." I ignored him, zooming in on a column highlighted in bright red. "According to your shareholder report, the company lost $2 million last year due to rising material costs. You told your investors you had to cut dividends. But when I followed the money, it didn't go to lumber yards or steel suppliers. It went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Lux Consulting." I hit the next slide. An itemized list of credit card transactions filled the screen. And Lux Consulting spent that $2 million on private jet charters to St. Bart's, Cartier jewelry, and a $50,000 deposit for the catering company staffing this very party, I stated coldly. "You didn't lose money on concrete, Gregory. You lost money because your wife treated the company operating account like her personal piggy bank. You are running a classic Ponzi scheme." The ballroom erupted. The investors, who had just been clapping for Gregory 10 minutes ago, were now pulling out their cell phones, frantically calling their lawyers. The realization that their millions had paid for Cassandra's gold dress sent a shockwave of rage through the crowd. Men in expensive suits were shouting, demanding their money back. Cassandra let out a screech that sounded more animal than human. "That is fake. She is trying to frame me." She lunged toward me, her hands curled into claws, desperate to snatch the phone and stop the presentation. She never made it. Two of Victor's massive bodyguards stepped in effortlessly, blocking her path like brick walls. She bounced off them and stumbled backward, chest heaving. Cassandra glared at Victor, screaming, "Get your goons out of my house. You are trespassing. If you are not gone in 5 minutes, I am calling the police to have you arrested." Victor looked incredibly bored. He slowly reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded legal document. "You are welcome to call the police, Cassandra," Victor said calmly. "But before you dial, are you absolutely certain this is your house?" Cassandra laughed hysterically. "Of course it is. My husband bought it 5 years ago." "Owning a home and holding the title are two very different things," Victor replied, unfolding the paper. "According to this deed of trust, this property was used as collateral for a commercial loan for the Green Horizon project. A loan that is currently 90 days past due. The lender has the right to immediate foreclosure." He looked up, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "And as of last week, my financial firm acquired that bank, along with all its distressed assets, including this house." Cassandra froze. The blood drained completely from her face. "The total debt on this property exceeds its value by $2 million, Victor continued, because Gregory forged his father's signature on the applications. Legally speaking, you are no longer the homeowners. You are squatters." Before the word squatters could fully register, another sound cut through the chaos. It started as a faint wail in the distance, growing rapidly louder and louder. The unmistakable, piercing shriek of police sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash violently against the tall glass windows of the ballroom. I looked at Gregory. "At 9 o'clock this morning," I whispered, "I sent every piece of evidence on that screen to the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS. You can settle with banks, Gregory, but you cannot buy your way out of federal tax fraud." The heavy double doors burst open again. A squad of federal agents wearing navy blue windbreakers emblazoned with the letters FBI and IRS poured into the room. They moved with terrifying speed. Gregory and Cassandra Gallagher, the lead agent, barked, "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and tax evasion." Gregory collapsed to his knees instantly, weeping into his hands, offering no resistance as the cold steel cuffs clicked around his wrists. But Cassandra snapped. As an agent grabbed her arm, she thrashed violently, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Let go of me. I am a victim. He made me do it." She twisted her body, trying to slap the agent. In the violent struggle, Cassandra jerked her head back. The sudden motion dislodged the elaborate, expensive blonde wig she had been wearing to hide her stress-ravaged hair. It tumbled off completely, landing on the floor like a dead animal. Underneath, her natural hair was matted, sparse, and entirely gray at the roots. Her contouring makeup smeared with sweat and tears. The glamorous Queen of the Hamptons was gone, replaced by a pathetic, desperate criminal exposed in the harsh light. As the agents dragged her out the door past the jeering investors, she was screaming for Gregory to take the blame. Gregory just kept his head down, finally realizing he had destroyed his life for a parasite. The wail of the sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. The ballroom was mostly empty now. The fair-weather friends and furious investors had fled the moment the handcuffs came out, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. The only people left were the cleaning staff, Victor Kensington standing like a sentinel near the stage, and my parents. My mother wiped her smeared mascara with a trembling hand. She looked at the empty doorway where her golden boy had just been dragged out, and then she turned her gaze to me. I saw the calculation happen in real time. She looked at Miles, who was holding the billionaire's hand. She looked at the foreclosure document in Victor's pocket. The disdain she had worn all evening vanished, replaced by a mask of desperate, maternal affection. "Valerie," she sobbed, taking a hesitant step forward. "Oh, my poor baby. I am so sorry. We had no idea Gregory was stealing. He tricked us." My father joined her, nodding vigorously, his hands clasped in prayer. "Yes, we were victims too. We will lose everything to the lawsuits. But you have the skills, Valerie. And with Mr. Kensington's backing, you could help us secure a bridge loan. You can help us rebuild the company. We are family." I let out a short, bitter laugh. There it was. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted a financial bailout. I took a step back, shielding Miles. "Stop right there," I said, my voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. 2 hours ago, you told me to sit by the trash. 2 hours ago, you watched my son cry and did absolutely nothing. You didn't love me when I was struggling to pay medical bills. You only love proximity to power, and right now, you are just trying to switch boats before you drown. "Valerie, please," my father begged. "I am a forensic accountant, father," I said coldly. "I analyze risk. And you two are the worst investment I have ever seen. You spent 30 years investing everything into Gregory and treating me like a liability. Now the market has crashed. I will not pay a single cent to clean up the mess you enabled. The bank will take your house just like they took Gregory's. I suggest you start packing." I turned my back on them forever, took my son's hand, and walked out of the ballroom. Fast forward 3 months. The justice system moves slowly, but karma works at its own pace. My parents lost their estate to the investor lawsuits and moved into a cramped, one-bedroom rental. Gregory, out on bail and stripped of all assets, found work scrubbing rims at a budget car wash in Queens, enduring the shouts of angry customers whose shoes he used to wear. Cassandra wasn't so lucky. Deemed a flight risk, she was sitting in a federal prison cafeteria, wearing a faded beige jumpsuit, fighting with hardened inmates over trays of gray, lukewarm meat. My life, however, took a very different path. The viral video of me dismantling a complex financial crime on a projector screen didn't just destroy my family's reputation, it built my legend. I was no longer an invisible widow. I was the founder and CEO of my own elite forensic accounting firm. Fortune 500 boards were so terrified of having a Gregory in their ranks that my phone never stopped ringing. We operated out of a sleek glass office in Manhattan, and I was turning down contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because I simply didn't have the time. But the real victory wasn't the money. The late afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor Kensington's private conservatory. In the center of the room sat a magnificent concert grand piano. Victor, looking more like a gentle grandfather than a ruthless billionaire, sat on the bench. Beside him sat Miles, his little legs dangling above the pedals. "Curve your fingers, Miles," Victor instructed softly, adjusting the boy's hand. "Press the keys with intention. Just like your father used to do." Miles pressed a major chord. The rich, warm sound filled the air. He beamed, leaning into his grandfather's side. Watching them, I realized the cycle of abuse had finally been broken. The greed that destroyed my brother had no place here. I left them to their lesson and drove to the cemetery. The wind swept crisp autumn leaves across the grass as I walked up the hill to Julian's grave. For years, this spot had been my weeping wall. Today, I wasn't here to cry. I knelt down and pulled a thick, navy blue document from my bag. I placed it against the gray headstone. It was the charter of incorporation for the Julian Kensington Music Foundation. Victor and I had completely liquidated the foreclosed Hamptons mansion. We sold the crystal chandeliers, the silk drapes, and the sports cars. We took every cent of that stolen, greedy money and put it into a trust to buy musical instruments and fun lessons for underprivileged children. I traced Julian's name on the cold stone, a peaceful smile on my face. They thought they could bury us. They thought they could break our son. But they forgot that true nobility isn't in a bank account, it's in the spirit. I cleared the ledger. I balanced the books. We were finally safe. Am I wrong for completely cutting off my parents and refusing to help them pay off the debts my brother left behind? Or should I have shown them mercy since they are old and lost everything? Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where karma finally balances the books. See you in the next one.